Hello. We're going to start our next presentation here in the main part of the library. And welcome everybody back to Singing Storytellers. It's great to hear music in the library. These stories. I think it's a place where they belong. People keep telling me that libraries are on the way out because we have Google and all this stuff. Don't believe them. David talked about having spaces for people to meet, congregate, and share stories and songs, and this is the place. I'm just filling until people want it. I'll start by introducing the title of our presentation, which is The Storyteller Who Stopped in the Middle in Turkic Siberia, Spirits Set Rules. And presenter is Kira Van Deusen. Kira was born in New York, and now she lives in Vancouver, and in between she became a formidable traveler. I have that on good authority. She's a cellist, but she will be playing for us today, and she specializes in epic stories of the North. To learn the Tuvan epic, she learned Russian and published a book on that subject. She's traveled to eastern Siberia, and he told me how to pronounce this, but I'm let you do it. But she did publish a book based on her experience in Siberia on shamanism. And she's published another book called Raven and the Rock, which are folk tales, I believe. And she's traveled to the Canadian Arctic with documentary filmmaker John Huston to look at epic storytelling there. And she's just come back from Iran in the process of learning Farsi and writing a novel based on a true story from that country. I have a good source. So I'll give the stage to Kira and give her a big hand and big welcome to Cape Breton.
Thank you. And can I put this down again? Did you put it up for yourself?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, thank you all for coming, and I'm just delighted and really honored to be here with all of you. And I want to say a thanks to all the people who have organized this and made it happen, and everybody who has come. Yeah, it's true, I actually had learned Russian many years ago without having any idea why I was learning Russian. And then it became helpful when I started to go to Siberia. And, you know, I was listening to David, who told us that his work has come out of the town where he was born and raised. It couldn't be more opposite, really, because I have not stayed anywhere near where I was born and raised. And I have moved, and my families through generations have moved, too, on both sides. And so I think that my work stems out of more bridging one culture to another. And that was the kind of thing that took me to Siberia and later to various other places, learning stories, and then bringing them back to my home, which includes you. So the story I'd like to share with you today comes from a place called Khakassia. And Khakassia is in the southern part of Siberia, sunny southern Siberia. And actually it is a good place to go for a vacation. It's a beautiful, beautiful landscape. It's grassland, steppe-land. And in every direction, I think you could almost look from anywhere and see some mountains. There are rivers, there are lakes. It's very beautiful, and I love it. And the people who live there are called Khakas, and they are unfortunately now only a very small minority in their region. They're about 10 to 12% of the population, the rest of them being mostly Russians. And so these people have undergone a lot of colonization and, of course, 70 years of communism, and that was their education. But in the years since the end of the Soviet Union, they've been, as many people in our own country, very active in bringing a lot of their culture back to life, including story singing. Their language is related to the whole Turkic family of languages. So that includes not only Turkey itself, but places like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and a number of other places in Siberia, so that the Turkic languages reach all the way to the Arctic Circle in the mouths of the Sakha people. The one thing they all share in common, all of these people, is a great epic tradition. People have been telling long, long stories about great heroes and heroines for many centuries. And the stories that they sing and they tell are usually, those long stories anyway, are in verse. And sometimes they're making the verses up on the spot as they go in certain parts of the story. And a lot of it they sing, although there's all kinds of variations too, that some people may speak part of it and sing part of it, and vice versa, back and forth. I wanted to say also that in the course of my being there, during the time when I was, there was a lot of activity in reviving of shamanic traditions in all over Siberia, actually, because it was sternly forbidden and many shamans lost their lives in the gulags during the communist period. After that, it started coming back. And one thing that the story singers and the shamans have in common, a couple of things. One is their connection with spirit beings, which you're going to hear about in the story. And another that I was thinking is interesting is that they're both involved in seeing the souls of the dead off to the next world. And I'd like it hereby to be known that I would like this when I go, that a story singer would come and sing over the person's life in the form of an epic. So just please bear that in mind. So I think that's enough, and now I'll just begin with the story. It's called the story of the Khaiji. One more thing to say. Khaiji is called because the kind of style of singing that he sings in is called Khai. And unfortunately, it's one that I have not learned, so I will just be singing in my own voice. But, so the Khaiji Agol, the storyteller who stopped in the middle. Oh, 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 A long time ago, there lived a great story singer. His name was Agol. And he used to make his way from one nomadic settlement to another on his red horse. And everywhere he went, he was very popular. People were happy to see him. They would invite him in. Sometimes he had to stay as much as 3 days in one place to get through one of his long stories. And so it happened one day that Agol wound up at the home of some acquaintances of his. And, well, they were, like everyone, delighted. Come in, Agol. They said, welcome, welcome. And they brought him into their yurt, their round, felt-covered hut. And they set him down in the place of honor. And they brought him a very good meal. They made him very comfortable. And then, they asked him if he would be willing to tell a story. Now, one of the rules that bind the story singer is this, that if you are asked, you must tell a story. And, well, of course that was why he'd come anyway, and so Agol was very happy to tell one of his stories. And the hosts of this yurt, they went out and they gathered in all of their neighbors and friends, and everybody gathered and they were jammed tightly into this yurt, just ready to hear the story. And Agol, now he tuned up his musical instrument, because another thing about the story singers is that they usually are playing a musical instrument. In Khakassia, sometimes it's a kind of zither called chatran, and sometimes it's a bowed string instrument called khomos, and that's what he had. So he tuned it up, and then he was ready, and so he started. Longer ago than the earliest times, more ancient than the most ancient of times, when our earth was brand new, In those golden days, between the blue sky and the dark earth, the rivers were young, and they began flowing and bounding over the rocks. And the great poplar trees grew tall with wide branches. And the greatest river of all, began flowing, flowing, flowing. Now in those far-off golden days that I've all, something happened. He had something scratchy in his throat. Didn't know what it was. He tried coughing, and it didn't seem to help. The people brought him a cup of hot tea, and he drank the hot tea, but that too didn't seem to help. And we tried to tell his story again, but it just was not working. And then he said, I think I'll just go outdoors and get a breath of fresh air, and perhaps then things will be better. And so he climbed over the people who were there in the yurt, and he went out the door and closed the door, and no sooner was he out there when he began to hear horses' hoofs, and 2 raven black stallions were galloping towards him. And on the backs of those 2 raven black stallions, there were 2 tall men. Their clothing was interesting. It was rich clothing. They were wearing beaverskin hats and silk coats. But although the style of it was very old-fashioned, the clothes seemed to be new. So right now, I've all started thinking there was something odd about these men. And now one of them called out to him and said, Agal, Ekya, come with us. Come with us to our father's house, and we will make you welcome. My father wants to listen to your stories. Now Agal looked them up and down once more, and now he really got it. He knew that they were mountain spirits. And one way you can tell a mountain spirit when you see one is that they have no eyebrows. And, well, he knew more about mountain spirits than that. After all, being a storyteller, he would. He knew that some people do go home with mountain spirits. And those who do, many of those people are never, ever seen again. Of the ones who do come back, well, most of them, it seems, are changed. And there's something about them. They are no longer to really connect and communicate with their fellow human beings. And so Agal knew this was not what he wanted for himself. And so he just said, no. And he went back inside the yurt. He went back in, he sat down, he started trying to tell his story again. But now, if anything, things got worse. His mind got confused. He started to mix up the names of the heroes of his stories, if you can imagine such a thing. It had never happened to Agal before, I can tell you that. And now the host began to get worried about the situation. And he said, perhaps we are at fault for this. We have not carried out our ceremonies for the mountain spirits in quite some time here. We will do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow evening everyone can gather again and Agal will finish his story. And so, although of course the people were disappointed, there wasn't much they could do about it, and so they all went home, the guests, and those who lived in that yurt lay down and went to sleep. And Agal took his place, and he lay down. But he wasn't able to sleep. Oh, he was so worried about those mountain spirits. The thing that worried him the most was that perhaps he was going to bring bad luck down on the people who were his hosts. And he was so worried about this that, well, he couldn't sleep, and finally he thought the only thing he could do would be to leave. And so he got up in the night, he crawled out of the yurt, and he saddled up his horse, and he began to ride away towards his own home. But it wasn't more than a few minutes when he heard those hoofbeats again. And one of the mountain spirits came back and said, "Agol, where are you going? We invited you to our father's house. He wanted to listen to you, and now you're going the opposite direction. Agol, get down from your horse, and let's you and I have a contest to see which of us is better at story singing." And so Agol got down from his horse, and the two of them started to sing, sometimes together, sometimes one at a time. And they sang, if you had been there, you would have heard that singing rolling all the way up the valleys, across the steppe land, and bouncing back from the mountains. Oy, oy, The mountain spirit was the first one to give up. He said, "All right, Agol, I was just testing you anyway. You are truly great. Now I say to you once again, come home with me, and we will treat you well, and you will become wealthy and even greater than you are now at your art." But Agol stopped, and he looked at him straight in the eye, and he said, "I will not come home with you. My place is with human beings. My place is with people. And my job is giving people joy." And now the mountain spirit was angry. He was back up on his horse, and he said, "Agol, you will regret this. Now, I say to you, go home, and do not ever set foot in this territory again. Because if you do, there will be trouble." And now, the mountain spirit wheeled on his horse and galloped away towards the mountains. And Agol got onto his horse, and he started for home. And he was kind of depressed. He was very sad and very still worried about those mountain spirits. And he said to himself, what a difficult thing it is to be a story singer. All this trouble he had. Well, he kept on going. He kept on going, riding for quite some distance. And then, from behind one of the great boulders, he heard a voice. Somebody was in pain. "Oh, Agol," came the voice. "How could you treat me the way you have? How could you treat me like this, Agol?" And now a man came crawling on hands and knees around the boulder. Agol took one look at him and, he knew who it was. It was the hero of the story that he had stopped in the middle. And there he was, saying, "Agol, you called us. You called me to relive my great exploits in the world. We came, I came, and then you didn't finish the story. And so I couldn't finish. I couldn't go home, and now I am stuck in your world." And now, of course, Agol remembered the other very important rule that story singers must abide with. And that is, once you have started your story, You must not stop. Although there is an exception. If you take a break in your story, you can stop temporarily, but you must leave the characters feasting so that they enjoy themselves. Because everybody knows that these characters in the stories are living beings, are they not? And the stories themselves are. Well, Algol looked at this poor man, and he knew that at this time and place there was nothing he could do about it. And so he continued riding on towards home. And he rode and he rode, and he passed the last mountain pass and came to his own home. And when he got there, he went into his yurt, he took his musical instrument, hung it up on the wall, and said, "That's it, I am finished. I am not telling any more stories again, ever." Well, in the summertime it wasn't too difficult. Because in summertime people don't listen to that many stories there anyway, because they're too busy working. Then the seasons passed. Winter came. Winter, the time for sitting beside the fire, hearing stories, telling stories. And Algol felt his gift bubbling up inside of him, just eager for expression. And he called upon the spirits of the creative upper world. And he asked them what he should do. And the Chayan, those spirits, they did not reply. And now he called upon the spirits of his own creative gift. And they did not reply. So he knew he had to make up his own mind. He waited, and finally he couldn't stand it any longer. He went out, he took his instrument down from the wall, went out and saddled up his red horse, who was very happy to go on another excursion by this time. He got onto his horse and he began making the circuit of the nomadic settlements once again. Oh, people were so happy to see him. They came out, they greeted him, they listened to his story with great joy. And, some of them even said that he sounded better than he'd ever sounded before. And so he kept on going. And then one day, and I'm not sure why he did this. Nobody's ever been really certain why he did this. But Algol crossed over a little mountain range. He crossed over the boundary between his land and the land where he had to stop the story in the middle. Just like that. There was the mountain spirit on his horse again. Algol, he said, "Did you not listen to me? I told you, do not ever come back to this land again." And I meant it. Now my father has sent me to take your life. But there is one more chance. We give you one more chance to come home with us and tell us your stories. But once more, Algol said to him, "I will not come home with you. My place is with human beings, giving them joy." And now the mountain spirit turned on his horse and galloped off towards the mountains. And you could hear his voice echoing, saying, "Algol, you will die." Again, much troubled by the difficulty of being a storyteller, Algol set off for home. And he rode, and then he felt a pain in his heart. Well, he got down from his horse, right next to one of those great circles of standing stones, the kurbans. He got down there and he lay down and he went to sleep. And in the morning, some herdsmen found him. And he said to them, gather the people together and tell them that the storyteller is dying." And so the herdsmen hurried off, and they gathered all the people together who came. And now Algol got up, and he took his hummus in his hands, and he began to sing. Oh, and he sang to them about the beauty of their land, He sang to them about their people, their wisdom, their courage. He sang and he sang until his last breath. And from that time, right down to this time, people have remembered that story singer Algol, the one who gave his life giving joy to people. Oh, 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 oh. And that's the